talk on the Westford Trolley turned out to be a lot more involved than I ever expected. At first I said to myself, do I have enough material to fill an hour? And that soon became, how do I cut this back to fit into an hour and get everything in? And the answer is that I could get everything in. When we gave the Nashua Acton and Boston Railroad talk, I opened with, how long do you think the trip took from Nashua to Concord? This time I will ask, time-wise, how long was the trolley trip from Ayr to North Chelmsford? It was advertised as 45 minutes. Later it was shown to be an hour and 15. So that's probably going to be the length of my talk. This wonderful picture is from a binder at the museum we've labeled Trolley Book, and I wish we could tell who put the book together, but we don't know. In 1900, Westford's population was 2,624 adults, and there were 497 horses. Why the interest in the number of horses in town? Right, they were a major source of transportation for a family in the 1900s. If you were fortunate enough to own a horse, and you wanted to get from one side of town to the other, and you didn't want to walk, you could harness up old Dobbin and set out that way. I did find, though, as early as 1901, there was one automobile in Westford which belonged to Allen Sargent. And in a December 26, 1908 Wardsman article, Sam Taylor mentioned that there were 4 automobiles. And we had various railroad options for travel. Trams or streetcars began in the larger cities across America by the 1880s, of course, pulled by horses, before becoming electrified. So when in 1900 the Stony Brook Valley Street Railway Company petitioned Westford with its plans to run a trolley from Ayr Junction to North Chelmsford, it was probably hailed as a great advancement. Wow, no more having to go up and harness the horse or team. There were actually 3 trolley companies petitioning towns in the area to start business. On November 13, 1900, the Lowell Sun reported that the town of Chelmsford had granted the franchise requested by the Stony Brook Street Railway Company. And in Westford on December 8, 1900, the Lowell Sun reported the selectmen of Westford have approved the petition of the Stony Brook Street Railway Company to lay track in that town for an electric line from Ayr Junction to North Chelmsford. There was even another one called the Lowell, Chelmsford, and Nebnasset Street Railway, which was petitioning Chelmsford for a line which would go to Nebnasset Grove in Westford. The original proposed route by the Stony Brook Street Railway Company went from Brookside, across the tracks at Westford Depot, where Stony Brook Acres is located at One Plain Road, up Depot Street to the center. It traveled along Main Street, avoiding Graniteville Road with its sharp S-curves, and instead went down to Forge Village Road to the area of number 17, the Coolidge House. At Coolidge's house, it turned and went through the woods and came out at Day's Corner, at the intersection of Cold Spring and Graniteville Roads. Then it went down Graniteville Road, across Conter's Bridge, and Stony Brook Railroad, and it turned left onto Broadway, left onto Cross Street, and from there paralleled the railroad tracks to Forge Village. And then, on June 15, 1902, the Boston Sunday Globe mentioned that the Stony Brook wanted a year's delay before laying any track. On September 17, 1902, the town gave a hearing to the Stony Brook Street Railway Company, and after a final meeting in October 1902, nothing more was heard of the Stony Brook Street Railway Company. On September 25, 1902, Westford listened to a proposal by the Lowell Fitchburg Street Railway. And so now the Lowell Fitchburg Street Railway Company was on the scene, petitioning Chelmsford, Westford, Groton, and Ayr to run a trolley through those towns. On May 9, 1903, agreement was reached with the towns of Westford, the Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway Company, to build a trolley line in Westford. The Lowell Daily Courier of May 11, 1903 reported a franchise granted by Westford to the Lowell and Fitchburg Road. Westford made sure its terms and conditions for the new street railway were known. The 1903 Westford Annual Report, beginning on page 22, shows the petition of order of notice of the Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway. These are the terms and conditions that the selectmen had put together, covering such things as locations, of single and double tracks, weight of ties, snow removal, blocking of streets, chestnut or cedar poles, height of wires and insulation. The selectmen even wanted street lights of not less than 25 candle power attached to poles at crossroads. They wanted cars to run hourly from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., and the fare not to exceed 5 cents from the Groton Town Line to Brookside, and again from Brookside to North Chelmsford, while the rate for school children attending school was to be 10 rides for 25 cents, or 2.5 cents a ride. And lastly, the road was to be completed 18 months after acceptance of the franchise. The route outlined was basically the same one as the Stony Brook Valley Street Railway had proposed, except the description of the route this time had a line coming up from Greig's Corner at River Street to 4th to Broadway, and then up Graniteville Road to the center. The Lowell Fitchburg Street Railway was organized December 9, 1904. A year later, in December 1905, the company asked the railroad commissioners for permission to issue stock. Just like the railroads, the street railways had to buy land and trolley cars, construct tracks, and install poles for electricity. Just to give you an idea of the preparation involved for the route, I counted 42 deeds in Westford alone, where the Lowell Fitchburg Street Railway bought land for its tracks and pole locations and obtained permission for rights-of-way. The strips of land they bought were usually 66 feet wide and then varied in length depending on the property they were crossing. Perhaps they were planning to double track as well as allowing room for the poles to fill that 66-foot width. Construction was to begin the first week of August 1905, and on the 19th in September, the Sun reported that the company had 400 men and 75 teams at work on the new road. Notice that little newspaper item we slipped in about town. The first free ride on the spur line of the electric railway was made last Sunday evening, when one and perhaps more rode on the tower car from the Four Corners down to Tadmuck Brook. That must have been exciting. On January 6, 1906, the Sun reported that a jumbo electric car consigned to the new Lowell Fitchburg Street Railway arrived in Lowell last night and was unloaded from a flat car on the tracks of the B&M Railroad. The car is a real beauty. It was built in Elizabeth, New Jersey by the John Stevenson Car Building Company. It is finished in corded oak with rattan seats and is designed to accommodate 50 passengers. Another sentence referred to the fact that more cars were coming soon. I'm going to include a note on this Brill Company. Stevenson was acquired by the J.G. Brill Company in Philadelphia in 1904. In 1919, during the influenza epidemic, that huge company known for building railroad cars and equipment was tasked with making coffins instead of railroad cars. During the week of October 16, 1919 alone, 4,597 Philadelphians died from influenza. And that comes from a book called The Great Influenza by John M. Barry, if you're interested. Several weeks ago, I contacted the Seashore Trolley Museum with a couple operational questions. The executive director, Katie Orlando, replied, stating, "At the end of the trolley pole, in contact with the overhead wire, there was either a small wheel or a carbon slide that made contact with the wire. This slide or wheel was called a trolley, and the reference to the entire vehicle as a trolley derives from the trolley at the end of the pole. Also, the pole holding the trolley would trail the car." Then when I asked if a car like this one that came into Westford Center didn't have a place to turn around, how did it maneuver to go back to its point of origin? And she answered that a double-ended car had controls at both ends. The other thing I want to show you is this is a single truck trolley, just one set of wheels in the middle. When we talk about the branch line at the center, you'll understand why that car was so shaky. Whereas this is a double truck car, two sets of wheels. You can see the difference in these pictures as this has the double set of wheels. But all too soon in January 1906, Westford folks learned that Westford Center was going to be bypassed by the trolley. Needless to say, town officials were more than a little upset when, after giving their permission for a trolley to go through Westford, that the route did not come up to the center as first proposed. A meeting was held in Boston on January 11, 1906, with the railroad commissioners, the Lowell Fitchburg Street Railway, and the town of Westford. The commissioners reported the gist of the whole trouble lies in the fact that the road, as originally planned, gave Westford a location on the main line. Then the Lowell and Fitchburg said that management had changed, and they complained and said it would cost $95,000 to build a spur. However, the Railroad Commission upheld the original plan that the center needed to be included. And by May 19, 1906, the Sun reported that the company had withdrawn its original petition for a line from Westford Depot to the highest part of the plateau, and now they were considering the Brookside location and trying to figure out how to deal with the tracks of the B&M Railroad. And we will continue that part of the story when we talk about the branch line. Grand opening. We have this wonderful poster donated by Nancy Hall Bissell, which states, on or after June 1st, the trolley line will be open. On Thursday, May 31st, 1906, the full line opened from Ayr to North Chelmsford. The Boston Herald reported the new electric road connecting Ayr and Lowell, known as the Lowell and Fitchburg Railroad, was opened this morning, the selectmen of Westford being assured a branch line will connect that village. The trip takes an hour and 15 minutes. Cars running every 15 minutes. The Westford branch will be open to West Chelmsford by August 1st, 1906. And I would add a little note to that, that August 1st, 1906 date slips out 9 months. That branch line doesn't open until May 25th, 1907. Some statistics for you to see. The distances, the opening dates, the gauge, the numbers of cars. You have to remember, the roads are dirt at this point, and they take a lot of maintenance. The Sun reported on May 31st, 1906, as yet the cars are not coming into Lowell, but in a few days will run from Merrimack Square to Ayr Junction without change. The explanation is the cars were not going into Lowell, as the section from North Chelmsford to Lowell was owned by the Eastern Massachusetts Street Railway, while the line from North Chelmsford to Ayr was owned by the Lowell and Fitchburg. So if you were coming out from Lowell, you had to change at North Chelmsford and vice versa. Aren't these great pictures? Look at that. So we have these wonderful new people movers in place, ready for the working folks during the week. But what are we going to do with the trolleys on the weekends when people are off from work? You don't want these trolleys sitting idle, not earning any money. Well, you bring them to what was known as trolley parks. This map is from a timetable booklet promoting Whalum and Canobie Lake Parks and Wachusett Mountain. You can also see on the map that Nabnasset Lake is in bold print. If you've seen Jeff Hall and Rich McLaughlin's talk on Nabnasset, you begin to understand how the publicity drew these people in. I have to read a couple sentences from this glowing promotional piece on Nabnasset from the booklet. Quote, "The ride from Ayr to Lowell is a continuously charming prospect, passing many beautiful lakes en route. Chief among these is Nabnasset, the handsomest inland body of water of its size in New England. No more picturesque and delightful courses will be found than those in Nabnasset, and as a most essential adjunct to any picnic grounds is the beauty and rustic pleasure afforded by Nabnasset's exquisite groves. Forge Lake, Burgess Lake, Long Sought For, and Crystal Lake. These are all excellent places to while away a hot day in summer." And this is the Whalum brochure with the trolley schedule. On March 29, 1913, the Lowell Courier-Citizen reported that the Fitchburg and Lowell Street Railway had been sold to a group of Fitchburg men who have individually purchased a majority of the stock. This is when Wesley W. Sargent became the president of the organization. And is it any surprise that the president of the Fitchburg and Lowell Leominster trolley line, Wesley W. Sargent, was also the developer of Whalum Park? Wesley Watts Sargent, born in 1860, died in 1958. His obituary from the Boston Herald of January 13, 1958 stated, "In 1892, Mr. Sargent opened Whalum Park, the third amusement park to be built in the country." You will see mention of his name in discussions the Westford selectmen had with the Lowell and Fitchburg Company. He was president of the Lowell Fitchburg from 1913 through 1920, as well as president of the Fitchburg and Leominster line. He had a daughter, Constance, who died in 1984 as the wife of William H. Greene. A couple lines from her obituary mention, during World War I, she worked for her father, who was manager of the Fitchburg-Leominster Street Railway Company and Wayland Park. Mrs. Greene obtained one of the first driver's licenses granted to a woman in Massachusetts and drove 60,000 miles during the First World War while her father inspected overhead electric lines. In 1908, the Lowell Fitchburg Street Railway was the only New England street railway to show an increase in receipts over the previous year, thanks in large part to the promotion of Wayland Park. Arnold Wilder and June Kennedy's Westford Recollections stated in talking about family fun times, "We could also take the streetcar from Graniteville to Ayr and then take another one that connected to Wayland Park." Newspapers showed that the Sunday school annual picnic of the Methodist Church in Graniteville was held at Wayland Park for a few years. Wayland Park, which operated since 1893, was sold in 2000. That year, the 86-year-old carousel was auctioned for $457,000 before the sale of the property. There is now a 240-unit apartment complex on the site. All is not lost, however. Canopy Lake Park in New Hampshire was also a trolley park. As of 2021, it was one of only 13 trolley parks still operational in the United States. It opened this year on May 17th. So, let's hop aboard our waiting trolley in North Chelmsford at what was then called Stevens Corner, renamed Vinyl Square in 1922 for Alberton Vinyl, killed in World War I, and follow the route. Coming out from North Chelmsford, the trolley skirted along the end of what was then called Crystal Lake. We now know it as Freeman Lake, named for Bruce Freeman, state rep from Chelmsford. The Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is also named for him. The next landmark along the route on Groton Road is what was called the Triangle Store at number 148 Groton Road, North Chelmsford. Swain Road is on the right, and Main Street heading into West Chelmsford is on the left. This is where the spur track to Brookside branched off, and we'll come back here in a bit. And look at the price of those Cheetos. I looked them up online. They're $4 to $5 for 8 ounces. This is the Fletcher Railroad crossing from the Fletcher Granite Company. Following the main route, the electrics continued west on Groton Road. Alex Belita says at Fletcher's Quarry Railroad crossing, number 527 Groton Road in Ace Hardware, if you need some landmarks, the car crossed the railroad with a loud ka-thunk, ka-thunk. Midway between Fletcher's and Whidden's Corner, that's Oak Hill Road, was a turnout or switch. The area just east of the Fletcher Railroad crossing is where Henry Keyes had his accident. Now the line continued along Route 40 until the area of 454 Groton Road in Westford, where the track left Groton Road and started in through the woods and immediately crossed Forest Road. If you search for an aerial view of this area, you can clearly see the old trolley route because Mass Electric runs power lines through here. It makes a good walking trail all the way to Beacon Street. The track continued through the woods, crossing Depot Street, and then Dunstable Road. Alex Belita says at Dunstable Road there was a shed that provided shelter for waiting passengers. Elizabeth Carver McKay stated in her interview with June Kennedy, "When we were going to Lowell, Mr. Judd would drive us, horse and buggy, past the railroad station up to what we call the North End and through the wilderness. There was a trolley car line. He was supposed to wait with us until my mother got on the trolley so that there would be no one to bother her in any way." Alex continues. Next it crossed over Nutting Road on the bridge and then Keyes Brook Bridge. There was an interchange about a quarter-mile west of Nutting Road. There the trolley paused and waited for the air trolley to appear. When it did, the conductors exchanged cars and returned to their points of origin. This happened every hour and all weather. The line continued on through the woods and came out on Beacon Street, and then the intersection of North Main, River, Beacon, and North Street at what we call Greig's Corner. Thanks to Charles Hildreth's photographs, we have pictures. Greig's Corner was another sticking point for the town, as the Lowell Fitchburg Company wanted the corner straightened. So Westford straightened it, and then charged the Lowell Fitchburg Street Railway Company $2,250 for their 50% share of the widening. On October 1906, not that many months after the trolley began running, Stephen Gardell of Graniteville took on an issue his father, August Gardell, had with the trolley company. Briefly, Stephen Gardell had heaped a quantity of gravel on the tracks near his barn and had stuck up pieces of red cloth on both sides of the gravel heap as danger signals. Well, that certainly got their attention. August Gardell said, on December 19, 1903, the Lowell Fitchburg Street Railway Company promised to pay me $1,000 for the right-of-way through my street, to be paid in 3 months. At the end of 3 months, I went to the office of the company at Ayr to collect the money. I was informed by the man in charge that he did not know anything about the transaction and that the papers were no good. 2 weeks ago, the Lowell Fitchburg Company offered my lawyer $500. Now, all I found in deeds was this little triangle piece, but evidently nobody held Stephen's dumping of gravel on the trolley tracks against him, as in 1915 he was elected as a constable in Westford. To continue, the trolley then ran along the side of North Main Street in Graniteville to the head of Broadway at Abbott's Corner. Take a look at these wonderful pictures, again by Charlie Hildreth. What is so significant about them at this point? It looks like the wires are still not installed. The Lowell Daily Courier on December 20th, 1905 stated that Smith, Hurst, and Allen of Philadelphia were the contractors for stringing the wires. It was the company's intention to have the cars run on the main line by the first day of January, but from the present outlook, it seems impossible for them to complete the work by that time. However, the company did manage to begin operations from North Chelmsford to Graniteville on January 3, 1906. The Lowell Courier of the 4th carried an article stating a trolley ran through Graniteville for the first time on January 2nd. The sight of an electric car in full operation on our village street attracted great attention, and after a long and patient wait, it is gratifying to know that we are right on top of the bandwagon and able to toot our little horn. This is Abbott's Corner. Graniteville Pride's monument, erected in 2000 at Broadway and North Main, marks the site of Abbott's Corner. The structure shown here was the Abbott office building. That sat at the corner. It was demolished probably in the early 1960s. That lot is so small it must have hung out over the water. Notice the dust in this picture. As I mentioned earlier, the Methodist Church Sunday School picnics were held at Wayland Park. It was mentioned in the Wardsman in both 1924 and 1926. They even had their own special car. The trolley then continued along the mill pond and then past the Blodgett store, where there was a waiting room, and then continued behind the house known as the Block, or the Worcester Block, at 84 North Main. And this is where it joined up and ran parallel beside the Stony Brook Railroad. It then paralleled the Boston and Maine Railroad line here, where it continued under the old Nashua, Acton, and Boston Railroad Bridge, again staying on the north side of the railroad tracks. The Wardsman of November 25, 1905 reported, the Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway Company have received the proper permission from the Boston and Maine people and commenced excavating underneath the tracks of the Nashua and Acton branch last Sunday. And then on January 20th, 1906, the Wardsman reported that the new bridge the Boston and Maine was building over the trolley tracks was completed. It crossed Town Farm Road. The trolley company took land at Town Farm. The Wardsman of December 6, 1905 stated, assessors and overseers of the poor will meet at the town farm Monday afternoon to confer and appraise the land taken from the town farm by the electric railway. On June 2, 1906, the Wardsman mentioned that the Lowell and Fitchburg had paid the $250 claim for damages. Alex adds, about midway between Town Farm Crossing and Forge Village, there was a turnout or switch in case cars met head-on. And so the trolley came into Forge Village, passing the power station at 4 East Prescott Street. Alex referred to the power station as a booster station. It converted AC power to 550-volt DC power for the trolleys. A newspaper article mentioned the substation is in charge of Mr. Wood of Graniteville and Harry Brown of this village. A comment about the power they were operating on here. When the trolley made its preliminary run up Cummings Hill in 1907 to the center, the Lowell Courier reported the rise on Cummings Hill was taken easily by the car without the power from the substation at Forge Village. There seemed to be ample power furnished from Lowell. The waiting room for the trolley was evidently in the Prescott Tavern, but by May 14, 1910, according to the Wardsman, the location was changed. The stopping place of the Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway cars has been changed from Prescott's to the J.B. Splain's store. This arrangement will prove more convenient for patrons of the road and also the people living in the Prescott house, who were continually annoyed by persons waiting for cars. The waiting station will be open Sundays to accommodate passengers. And just in case you were wondering, the Prescott Tavern was demolished in 1976, and today Spinners is located here. Today we recognize the stopping place as Pizzeria Presti, but as this 1916 photograph shows, this was Splain's grocery store with the post office and the waiting room for the trolley sharing the building. We have a couple more great pictures that came from Rich McLaughlin. There's the power station behind Splain's store. And there's another view coming across the street. On Monday, June 4th, 1906, after the grand opening, just the previous Thursday, the trolley derailed in Forge Village. A trolley car from North Chelmsford came into Forge, and when near the B&M Railroad Station, the forward trucks of the car left the track. So they sent for a repair car from Ayr, and as it came down the hill into Forge, it lost its brakes and crashed into the derailed car, smashing the vestibule and a lot of the woodwork. Not the best picture, but this came out of that trolley booklet. The trolley line then continued through the middle of Forge Village on West Prescott Street, out past the Franco-American Club and the VFW. You can almost see the line in this 1911 photograph taken by Quincy Day. So about the area of Gilson Road is where it went back into the woods and cut across to Sunset Crossing. Carl Byron says that after leaving Forge Village, the right-of-way turned away from the B&M and ran roughly midway between it and Route 225. It crossed Route 119 at what is now Sunset Road, a third of a mile or so east of the Four Corners, Groton Ridges. The trolley then came into Ayr by the old schoolhouse at the corner of Westford Road and Sandy Pond Road and continued more or less parallel to the B&M tracks into Ayr. Tom Delaney of Groton confirmed the location and said, "I believe that is where it used to be called Sunset Crossing. If you go across the street, you can see the old railroad, the old rail bed. It's been a few years since I have been on it. We used to hunt in there a lot." Even Gordon Seavey referred to it when he wrote an article about the trolley. In fact, there was a little spa or tea room there run by Edward L. Smith family. Here's an ad for the place from the Boston Herald in April 1929. And the ad to get to Lost Lake refers to Sunset Crossing and the Mohawk State Road. As Carl Byron stated, the trolley line came in by the old schoolhouse. Irving Rockwood, who is president and clerk of the Sandy Pond School Association, graciously gave us permission for use of this picture and supplied some history. He said, "Actually, we don't have much additional information about this photo. We can roughly fix the date as 1906 or later. The opening of the Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway line occurred shortly before the closing of the Sandy Pond School in 1906. In fact, the arrival of the streetcar led directly to the closing of the Sandy Pond School. The Ayr School Committee had for some years wanted to close the school in order to transfer the students, most of whom were elementary school age. to one of the newer schools in downtown Air. Their parents had resisted, however, as the only transportation alternatives were walking several miles or taking the train from the nearby Willow station. Neither of these were appealing options. The walk was simply seen as too long for younger children, while the train schedule was unfriendly and the cost was relatively expensive. The 1906 arrival of the streetcar solved these problems, as the streetcar ran much more frequently than the trains and cost much less. And so the school was closed and the children were transported to the newer schools in downtown Air via the new trolley. The car barn for the trolleys was at what is now 109 Central Avenue in Air, where the moving and storage building was located more recently. This completes the main line, and now we'll go back to the Triangle store and we'll pick up the branch line. As you heard at the beginning, there was a lot of friction because the center had been bypassed by the main line. In 1906, an agreement was reached to build a branch line to the center off the main route, but the B&M Railroad would not allow the trolley to cross the tracks anywhere along the route, and this concludes the center of Air. I will spare you all the back and forth on this and condense it as follows. First, an understanding was reached between the company and the selectmen of Chelmsford, which provided for a branch line from North Chelmsford to Brookside. But no understanding was reached with reference to the branch line to Westford. On August 27, 1906, several B&M officials were in town to view the crossing at Brookside. And on September 13, 1906, discussion of a trestle to cross was discussed. And finally, the Lowell Courier of September 19, 1906, reported an agreement had been reached. The railroad commissioners did not permit a grade crossing, but will allow the Fitchburg Street Railway Company to build to the Boston and Main tracks from North Chelmsford to Brookside and Westford Center to Brookside. All passengers will therefore have to change cars at Brookside. An item in the Sun on the 6th reported that work had begun on the spur track. There was speculation as to where the line would end in Westford Center, either at the post office then on Lincoln Street, which would have been where Conley's insurance office is located, or at the junction of Main Street and Boston Road in front of the church, the south side versus the north side of the town common. As you will see, the spur terminated at Main Street and Boston Road. This should look familiar. So let us return to the Triangle store. The branch line came off the main line at 148 Groton Road in North Chelmsford at the location of the Triangle store. And from there, it went along Main Street in West Chelmsford. We have another Hildreth glass plate, probably from 1906, showing the trolley line in front of 191 Main Street, West Chelmsford. And here is a colorized view from Fred Merriam. Mackerel sky, Reading our map here from left to right, after crossing the Chelmsford-Westford town line, it then crossed the Fletcher Quarry train track near Nabnasset Street, and then climbed Edwards Hill to Edwards Corner, which is Brookside Plain and Oak Hill roads. It then followed Brookside Road to Moore's Mill, where it terminated at 22 Brookside Road. We have a delightful photograph of John Hartford, conductor, and Dave Robbins, motorman, in front of 22 Brookside Road in 1912. Notice the trolley pole John is carrying. He was a local boy, son of George and Elizabeth Hartford of Hartford Road. His obit from 1906 stated that he had at one time been employed by the Westford Electric Car Company. Rich McLaughlin tells me this delightful photo came from Virginia Burnham, who lived at 20 Brookside Road. She had some connection to one of the gals here at the Brookside Bridge in 1917, maybe a great aunt. And a couple views of Brookside Crossing today. This is where you got off the trolley and walked across, and took a smaller trolley to reach Westford Center. The conductor on this car was Alfred, nicknamed Mokey, Tuttle, from Westford. Mr. Sullivan remains unidentified. The route began on the south side of the B&M tracks, turned west onto Lowell Road at what has been called Eliason's Corner, also Swede's Corner, and continued to Taylor's Corner. After passing the houses of Alvin Pauley and Sam Taylor, you were at the corner of Lowell and Stony Brook Roads at Taylor's Corner. This branch line to Westford was primarily a method of transporting children to and from school in the center. Year after year at town meeting, an amount was voted on for this service and general maintenance for the trolley. On December 5, 1908, the Wardsman reported that a new waiting station had been built at Taylor's Crossing. The architects were James H. O'Brien and John A. Taylor, aided by the traveling public. This was a perfect example of Westford folks along the route taking ownership. O'Brien lived on Stony Brook Road and Taylor on the Lowell Road, both along the route. Listen to this wonderful memory from Ruth Sargent Johnson, who lived at 88 Chamberlain Road, as she talked about walking to Taylor's Corner to catch the trolley for school. Ruth was born about 1901. In June Kennedy's recollections, June asked Ruth, "What school did you and your sister Edna attend?" And Ruth replied, "Frost School." Frost School. When we came to town, we went to the Frost School, and from here, referring to 88 Chamberlain Road, we walked over to what we called Taylor's Corner, where Mr. Sam Taylor lived. There was always a bunch of children there. They had a little hut out there that we could go inside of, and the electric car went by there, so we used to ride up to school on the electric car. When we got into high school, we sort of got tired of walking over to Taylor's Corner, and we used to walk all the way uptown. Later, after the electric car was taken away, the school buses came down to Taylor's Corner. That would be when my children were younger and picked up at the corner. It's interesting, these kids were walking right by the Stony Brook School that had closed in 1909. This is a whoops. The Sun reported on August 25, 1914, an electric car ran off the track and into a stone wall near the residence of Frank C. Drew on Sunday, August 23rd at 3 p.m. The 7 passengers who were in the car were badly shaken up, but no one had any serious injury. The accident happened on a curve in the road and was caused by the rails spreading. A large boulder in the stone wall held the car from going into the open field. Several large stones were hurled a distance of 15 feet. A car was sent from air. In about 2 hours, the running schedule was resumed. Our route has reached the corner of Lowell Road and Providence Road, at what was called Bannister's Corner. The line now turned onto Providence Road and began its ascent up Cummings Hill to Depot Street. Again, some Hildreth pictures. By October 1906, the Sun reported that due to large boulders, trees, and ledges, the opening of the branch line was delayed. We have this wonderful photographs of workmen on Cummings Hill on October 6, 1906, taken by Charles Hildreth. Another entry from October 27th, and speaking of the workmen, late on Wednesday afternoon, several Italians in the employ of the electric road, while unloading ties at Westford Station, got in an exciting dispute, developing into a rough-and-tumble fight with fists. Also, in referring to Cummings Hill, a line from the Lowell Courier of 13 May 1907 stated, "The Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway Company has spent about $15,000 in order to lay their car tracks on said hill, which is very wet and springy." And this is where Cummings Road joins Depot Street. It's been blocked off by the workmen. And this is a postcard called Parting of the Ways. Who were these 3 little kids on the postcard? Elizabeth Bosworth Field, in an interview with June Kennedy, stated, "I can remember going down Bannister's Hill, Cummings Road. The thing would sway. You'd think we were going off the track. The cars that came into Westford Center had only one truck. No wonder they called it the Jolly Jumper." Bob Spinner in Westford Recollections stated, "In high school, you'd get car sick because the high school boys shook it from the back seat during the ride." And June Kennedy asked Elizabeth Carver McKay, "You rode the trolley a lot. Did you think it was a shaky trolley?" And Elizabeth replied, "Oh, very, very shaky." As we said, the heavier, larger cars had the double trucks. In Westford Recollections, June asked Elizabeth Bisfield about sledding, and Biz replied, saying they used to go down Depot Street, and when the trolley came up Bannister's Hill, the conductor and motorman let them hold on, and they'd pull their sleds up for them. Here the workmen are laying track on Depot Street. Later, on August 21st, 1920, after the line was discontinued, the Wardsman reported that a gang of men had been busy these hot days removing rails and ties of the branch line electric road, being at work on Depot Street. And we finally reached the center. The new trolley line came along Main Street. You can almost see the arm for the wires above the streetlight here as we approach the common facing west. The branch line route ended on Main Street in front of the First Parish Church. We have 3 wonderful pictures showing the location. The last one, you can see it as car number 101. 118 years ago, on May 23, 1907, the first electric car scooted up the Lowell Road to Westford Center on the noon hour, Thursday, carrying, besides officials of the road, ex-Selectman Sherman H. Fletcher, Edward Fisher, and William C. Edwards. Those who ride after this will necessitate the expenditure of 5 cents. The first electric car. The following is from an article by June Kennedy from the Westford Eagle in 1970. When Miss Harriet Miller, teacher in the upper room of the Tadmuck School, which was 20 Boston Road, rang the bell to call the pupils in for morning recess, not a child was to be seen. Like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, they had disappeared as if by magic. Going to the road and looking up the street to the common, and seeing the figures moving and hearing voices and laughter, the 2 teachers rushed up to see what was happening. There, at the end of the car tracks, just opposite the Unitarian Church, stood the wonderful new electric car, and many of the children had never seen one. They were in and out of the doors, feeling of the outside, and in every way possible, demonstrating their joy and approval. What a reception. And thus began regular service on Saturday, May 25th, 1907. Problems and mishaps. Snow was the biggest culprit to the operation of the electric cars. Some winters there were whole weeks when the trolley couldn't run. A newspaper item from March 30th, 1916 mentioned the line was finally cleared of snow after being shut down for 12 days. There were also problems with falling trees and limbs blocking the rails, as well as broken wires. Once an accumulation of leaves caused problems, and countless times the problem was spread rails. A valuable cow belonging to Frank C. Drew at 46 Lowell Road was killed in October 1908 when she failed to get out of the road fast enough. The Lowell Sun of October 19, 1908 stated the officials of the Fitchburg and Lowell Street Railway made satisfactory settlement with Mr. Drew at once. J.A. Healy had the contract for grading Cummings Hill. A few days after the branch line opened on May 25th, the following was reported from the Wardsman of June 1. The first accident of the spur line occurred last Tuesday on Cummings Hill, where teams are busy grading the hill. A team belonging to John A. Healy was backed across the track loading gravel at the curve. The teamster did not hear the car, and the motorman did not see the team in season enough to stop the car, which struck the horses, staggering them in the direction of the earth and damaging the car sufficiently to send it to the repair shop. The spur line is now equipped with a large-styled car with whistle. However, there were 2 deaths other than Frank C. Drew's cow that were directly related to the trolley. Just 10 days before the trolley service ended, James Holmes of 4 Pershing Street, Forge Village, was struck and killed on July 6, 1929, in the area of the power station in Forge Village by a trolley car operated by John C. Daffy of Ayr. James Holmes was age 64 and had been an employee of the Abbott Worsted Company. An inquest was held, and it appeared from the evidence that Holmes was under the influence of liquor just prior to the accident. A side comment on John Daffy. He had a sister, Susan, and her obit stated that she had attended the Sandy Pond School in Ayr. The other fatality was that of Henry Keyes, or Tricky Keyes, the man who moved the old Academy building to this location in 1907. He was in a terrible accident a little east of those Fletcher granite railroad tracks that crossed Groton Road while driving a team of horses. Both legs fractured in collision. Mr. Keyes was homeward bound, driving a 2-horse wood sled and apparently in the car tracks, the Lowell Sun of Feb 14, 1917 reported. The electric car smashed into the rear of the sled, throwing the driver onto the shafts between the horses. Mr. Keyes was picked up and carried into a nearby house where he was given first aid by Dr. Fred Varney. He was later removed to the hospital. Mr. Keyes' sled, it said, carried a signal light at the time of the accident. On March 7th, Henry died at St. John's Hospital in Lowell following amputation of one of his legs. An inquiry into his death was reported on September 17, 1917, in the Sun, and stated, "I find that the death of Henry O'Keyes was not caused by the criminal negligence of said Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway Company or of its officers, agents, or servants." Finally, in 1918, Henry's niece, Amelia W. Lambert, who was the executrix of his estate, sued the Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway Company. In a sealed verdict, the jury awarded $2,000 for death and $3,000 for conscious suffering. Henry is interred in Fairview Cemetery, Westford. In 1918, the Board of Selectmen, the School Committee, and the Finance Committee, acting jointly as a committee, were appointed to investigate and report relative to the advisability of the town continuing to expend money for the operation of the branch line. They met with our friend Mr. Sargent, president of the Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway Company. Mr. Sargent, speaking for the Street Railway Company, stated that the company would not bear any portion of the burden of putting the roadbed and the overhead fixtures in repair. There was a $1,200 deficit from the previous year owed the trolley company. Repairs over 5 years were going to amount to $1,600, and they had already begun employing auto trucks, buses, to transport students. So the committee came back and stated they did not feel justified that the town should appropriate any more money for the restoration of the branch line. And at town meeting, the town agreed with that decision. On December 13, 1919, the Wardsman reported the branch electric railway from Westford to Brookside is being dismantled for discontinuance. And on November 6, 1920, the Wardsman reported the poles and wires of the discontinued electric road from Brookside to Westford have been sold to the Lowell Electric Light Company, and they have commenced to remove them elsewhere. We have this wonderful picture of Buzzy Miller standing beside his Ford V8 bus. His obituary stated he had been a school bus driver for 30 years. His daughter-in-law was Rita Edwards Miller, as in the Miller School. Next, service on the branch line from Brookside to North Chelmsford ended in late 1926. The Selectmen's Report of 1927 from the town report stated, the tracks of the Fitchburg and Lowell Street Railway from Brookside to the West Chelmsford line were removed during the early spring, and the highway put in good condition and oiled. On November 24, 1926, Marinell Bus Company requested permission to operate bus service between North Chelmsford and Brookside. Mr. Marinell explained that the bus would operate over a route discontinued by the street railway. And we have this wonderful picture from Fred Merriam of Chelmsford showing the Marinell sign over the building in Vinyl Square. So, back to the main line and wrap up. By March 1926, the Lowell and Fitchburg Railway Company negotiated with the Eastern Mass Street Railway Company to operate the main line from North Chelmsford to Ayr. Eastern Mass agreed and operated the line until July 1929, when the main line was sold as junk. The main line was shut down on Tuesday, July 9, 1929. An auction was held at the Car Barn on Central Avenue in Ayr. The Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway was sold at auction for $31,000 to Alex Slitman of Boston. Eastern Mass Street Railway bid up to $30,000 for the property. After the sale had been confirmed by the court, it is expected service will be discontinued. It was stated that the new owners will junk the road. Two newspapers reported service would be discontinued on July 17, 1929. Graniteville, streetcar service ends today. Bus schedule, if any, not announced. Notices have been posted in the trolley cars of the Eastern Massachusetts Street Railway to the effect that service on the Ayr line will be discontinued on Wednesday, July 17th, and it is taken for granted that the buses will commence at that time. And here is the Eastern Mass bus schedule, dated July 28, 1929. Bus service filled in after the trolley closed down. On July 20th, 1929, the Wardsman reported Westford had granted a bus privilege to the air taxi service to run buses from Westford through Groton to Ayr, practically over the same route as that served by the Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway. Also, the Lowell Sun of September 25th, 1929, reported the Boston and Maine Transportation Company has begun a bus service from Forge Village to Ayr, which connects with the Eastern Massachusetts Street Railway Company's buses from North Chelmsford to Forge Village. On December 25, 1930, the Sun reported under Westford News, the bus line formerly operated by the Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway Company has been taken over by George Marinell of North Chelmsford, who was running it on the same schedule. John George Shepard's obituary stated he drove buses for Marinell Bus Company for over 50 years. John George Shepard was the father of Sandy Shepard of Westford. Sandy died in 2022, and many thanks to Doug Shepard for use of this photograph. Now, week after week, newspapers reported dismantling of the trolley route. All the trolley wires on the Lowell and Fitchburg system, which was sold recently, has been taken down. The tracks are to be removed later. The Lowell Courier-Citizen of March 30th, 1930 reported, Graniteville. Workmen have been busy here for the last few days, taking up the rails of the Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway Company. These rails are being placed in freight cars to be shipped away at once. And a few weeks later, the Lowell Courier of May 22 reported, the last of the rails used by the Lowell and Fitchburg Street Railway Company have been removed from the streets here. The said streets have been placed in first-class condition, and now there is not a sign to indicate that a trolley line formerly played an important part in the community life of the town. The motor bus has replaced the trolley car and seems to meet all requirements. And so from the 1930 Westford Town Report, we find that the Highways Report. The tracks of the Lowell Fitchburg Railway in Graniteville and Forge Village were removed during the early spring, and the roads where tracks are taken off were widened and rebuilt. Thus, with the removal of the rails, the poles, the wires, the trolley line has become only a memory. The later years of the time of the trolley were a period filled with turmoil in the United States, as first we became involved in World War I. Meanwhile, the great influenza epidemic erupted in 1918, and then in 1929 the stock market crashed. But the death knell of the trolley was obviously the growth of the automobile. It quickly outpaced any demand for most trolley service. By 1929, the number of passenger cars registered in Massachusetts was 903,000, and over 113,000 commercial vehicles. And in Westford, by 1936, there were 1,217 registered vehicles. The automobile was here to stay. Oh, and if you're interested, in 1929, there were still 178 horses in Westford. Thank you all so much. Many, many thanks to all of you who supplied information for this talk. And there's a brief bibliography.